All right, so are you ready to dive deep?
Always.
Because today we're going to be tackling IOTA,
Okay.
and it's fascinating tangle technology.
Sounds good.
You want to go beyond Bitcoin, right?
Right.
And the research we've got lined up, the Tangle by Sergey Popov, is going to take us there.
And what's really cool about this paper, what's amazing about it, is it manages to break down some really complex math
Yeah.
in a way that even I can understand.
Okay, so if you say it's digestible,
Uh-huh.
then we know it must be good.
Yeah.
So what is the deal with IOTA? I keep hearing how it's not your typical blockchain.
That's right, yeah. IOTA is aiming to be the backbone of the Internet of Things.
Okay.
A world where we have, like, billions of devices,
Right.
all trading tiny bits of value with each other. And for that kind of volume, a traditional blockchain just wouldn't cut it.
Okay, so picture this. A future where your smart fridge can automatically order groceries and pay for them with microtransactions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But imagine if every single one of those tiny transactions had to be added to a blockchain.
Oh, wow.
It would be incredibly slow and expensive with all those transaction fees.
Right.
That's where IOTA's Tangle comes in.
Okay.
Instead of a chain, it uses something called a DAG, a directed acyclic graph.
What now? Okay, you're going to have to break that down for those of us who don't speak fluent tech.
Basically, instead of one long line of transactions like a blockchain, imagine a web where each transaction connects to others, creating this intricate network. That's the Tangle in a nutshell.
So instead of waiting for a whole block to be added to a chain, transactions can happen much more quickly and efficiently.
Yes.
That makes sense for a world with billions of devices all talking to each other.
Absolutely, and here's where it gets really cool. The Tangle eliminates the need for miners altogether.
Woo!
No more waiting around for someone to validate your transaction.
Okay.
And no more pesky transaction fees eating into those micropayments.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
No miners. That sounds amazing, but how on earth does the whole thing stay secure if no one's getting paid to keep it honest?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the paper dives into this brilliantly.
Yeah.
Essentially, in the Tangle, participating in the network security is built into the process of making transactions. When you want to make a transaction, you have to validate two previous transactions, and the computational work you do in validating them becomes your proof of work.
So the more transactions you approve, the more you're contributing to the network's overall security. I'm starting to see how this whole thing fits together.
Exactly. And to help visualize this, the paper includes a diagram, figure 1, that shows how these transactions link up.
Right.
It really does look like a tangled web, but in a good way. Each transaction is connected to others, forming a complex and secure network.
This is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So there's no central authority calling the shots, but the system is still secure because everyone's incentivized to play by the rules.
You got it. Now, it's important to understand the concept of weight in this system. Each transaction is assigned a weight that represents the computational effort put into validating it.
So the more work you do, the more weight your transaction carries. That makes sense.
Right, and here's where it gets even more interesting. The paper talks about cumulative weight.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's so special about cumulative weight?
It's not just about the weight of your individual transaction, but also the weight of all the other transactions that directly or indirectly approve it.
Okay.
This cumulative weight is how the system determines which transactions are the most reliable and trustworthy.
So it's like a chain of trust, but instead of links, it's built on the cumulative effort of everyone validating transactions.
Exactly. It's a clever way to ensure that the system is robust and secure, even without a central authority.
This is all incredibly clever,
Yeah.
but I have a feeling it's not all smooth sailing.
Right.
What about those who might want to game the system? Every good system needs a good stress test. Right?
You're absolutely right. And the paper does a great job of exploring some potential attack scenarios.
Yeah.
One of which is the large weight attack.
Okay, large weight attack.
Yeah.
That sounds a little ominous.
Mm-hmm.
What's the strategy here? Paint me a picture of this attack.
Imagine this.
Okay.
An attacker wants to double spend their IOTA.
Oh, wow.
So they send a payment to a merchant and then immediately try to create a second conflicting transaction.
Right.
But here's the twist. They pour a ton of computational power into making the second transaction incredibly heavy.
So they're trying to flex their computational muscles, hoping that their bogus transaction gets approved first, simply because it carries so much weight.
Precisely. It's like trying to cut in line because you brought a really big gift, hoping no one will notice it's empty.
Clever analogy.
Yeah.
But would it actually work? Could someone really manipulate the tangle like that?
That's the question the paper grapples with. It argues that if there were no limits on how much weight a single transaction could have, this kind of attack could pose a real threat.
Okay, so that's a big if.
Uh-huh.
But I'm guessing Iota has a defense mechanism for this kind of scenario, right? What's stopping someone from just muscling their way to the front of the line?
You're right to suspect there's a safeguard. One solution the paper proposes is actually pretty elegant in its simplicity, limiting the maximum weight a single transaction can have.
So there's a weight limit on those metaphorical gifts, so to speak.
Yeah.
No matter how much computational power you have, you can't just overload the system with one massive transaction.
Exactly. This helps keep things fair and prevents anyone from gaining too much influence over the network.
Yeah.
It ensures that IOTA stays decentralized and resilient.
That makes a lot of sense. But I have a sneaking suspicion that the large weight attack isn't the only trick these hypothetical attackers have up their sleeves.
Yeah.
What other scenarios does the paper explore?
Well, there's another intriguing one called the parasite chain attack.
Ooh, parasite chain. That sounds straight out of a science fiction novel.
Uh-huh.
I'm hooked. Tell me more.
Picture this. An attacker secretly builds their own little shadow version of the tangle alongside the main one,
Okay.
like a parasitic vine clinging to a healthy tree. This parasite chain might even reference transactions from the legitimate tangle, but here's the key. It's not actually contributing to the network's security or stability. It's just lurking there, trying to gain enough weight to launch an attack.
Okay, I'm sensing a but coming here.
Yeah.
Because if this parasite chain is just a cheap imitation, surely it can't compete with the real deal, right?
You're on the right track. The paper points out that if attackers were just using traditional metrics like height or score, this parasite chain wouldn't stand a chance.
Right.
However, they've got a trick up their sleeves.
Okay.
They can artificially inflate the number of tips on their parasite chain.
Tips. Wait a minute, we haven't talked about tips yet, have we? What are those, and how do they play into all of this?
You're right. We got a little ahead of ourselves. Think of tips as unapproved transactions that are hanging out in the tangle, waiting to be validated.
Okay, that makes sense.
Remember how new transactions have to approve two previous ones? Well, those unapproved transactions waiting in line are the tips.
Okay, so these attackers are creating a bunch of bogus tips on their fake tangle to make it seem more important than it really is.
Exactly. They're trying to game the system by creating the illusion of activity and legitimacy.
So how does IOTA fight back against this kind of trickery?
Yeah.
If they're playing a numbers game, how can the real tangle compete?
This is where IOTA gets really ingenious.
Okay.
It turns out that simply looking at the raw number of tips isn't enough.
Right.
They needed a more sophisticated way to evaluate transactions and determine which ones were genuinely contributing to the network.
So what's the secret weapon? How does IoT tell the difference between a legitimate transaction and a wolf in sheep's clothing?
This is where it gets really cool. The paper proposes a solution based on a Markov Chain Monte Carlo algorithm, or MCMC for short.
A what now?
Okay,
Okay, you're going to have to break that one down for us mere mortals.
I hear you. It does sound complicated.
Uh-huh.
But it's actually a really elegant solution.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Imagine releasing a pack of digital bloodhounds into the tangle.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So how do these digital bloodhounds sniff out the best transactions to approve? What are they looking for?
These digital bloodhounds take a random walk through the tangle.
Uh-huh.
But here's the kicker. Their steps aren't completely random.
Okay.
They're drawn to transactions with higher cumulative weight.
Right.
Remember, those are the transactions that have already been validated by lots of others, so they're considered more trustworthy.
Ah, so it's like the bloodhounds are following a scent, and the stronger the scent, the more confident they are they're on the right track.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And because these MCMC bloodhounds are looking at the overall strength of the scent, the cumulative weight, rather than just the number of tracks, they're much less likely to be fooled by a parasite chain.
Okay.
They can tell the difference between a real, bustling forest of transactions and a staged scene in a fake tangle.
That is so clever.
Yeah.
This MCMC algorithm is like IOTA's secret weapon for maintaining security and preventing those sneaky attacks.
Uh-huh.
But what about these tips that attackers are manipulating?
Yeah.
How does the MCMC algorithm deal with those?
That's another area where this approach really shines. Okay. Not only does it sniff out those fake tangles, but it also discourages what the paper calls lazy tips.
Lazy tips.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm really curious.
Yeah.
What in the world is a lazy tip?
Think of lazy tips as transactions that try to cheat the system.
Oh, okay.
Instead of putting in the work to validate newer transactions, they try to get away with validating really old ones, kind of like clocking in for work and then taking a nap.
Right.
They're not contributing much to the network's security, but they're hoping to still get rewarded.
So they're trying to game the system by taking shortcuts.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the MCMC algorithm isn't fooled so easily.
You got it. The digital bloodhounds can spot these lazy tips from a mile away because their cumulative weight won't be nearly as impressive as those transactions that are actively participating in securing the network.
This is all incredibly fascinating.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, what about the future? We're on the cusp of a quantum computing revolution.
Right.
Is IOTA prepared for that? Could a quantum computer come along and crack the whole system wide open?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And thankfully, this paper doesn't shy away from addressing the quantum challenge.
So what's the verdict?
Yeah.
Should we be worried about quantum hackers coming after our IOTA?
The paper makes a strong argument that IOTA is actually more resistant to quantum attacks than many other systems out there.
Okay, that's somewhat reassuring.
Yeah.
But I need to understand why. What makes IOTA so special in the face of quantum computing?
It comes down to a few key factors. First, remember those limits we talked about on how much weight a single transaction can have? That's a built-in defense mechanism against brute force attacks, even from a quantum computer.
Right, so even with all their speed, a quantum computer can't just overwhelm the IOTA network with a single massive transaction.
Exactly, but there's another, even more important factor at play here.
Okay.
It has to do with the way IOTA finds the nonce.
Nonce. Okay, you're going to have to remind me, what is a nonce again, and why does it matter so much, especially with these quantum computers on the horizon?
Right, yeah. So the nonce is like it's like a special key,
Okay.
that unlocks each transaction in IOTA.
Okay.
It's a bit of data, and you have to find it through this trial and error process to complete the kind of cryptographic puzzle. That's what secures the transaction.
So it's like trying to find the right combination to a lock.
Exactly.
And a quantum computer could theoretically do that much, much faster than our regular computers.
Yeah, that's the idea, yeah. But the algorithm IOTA uses to find this nonce, it's designed to be, like, really lightweight,
Okay.
and agile.
So even though a quantum computer might be able to crack the code faster, it wouldn't actually give them a significant advantage, like overall,
Right, exactly.
in the grand scheme of the IoT network.
Exactly.
Okay. So while we can't, like, completely rule out the quantum threat, it sounds like IoT is built with at least, like, a really strong defense against it.
Yeah, the paper makes a compelling case. I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things about IoT is that its structure, the way it's designed, makes it inherently kind of more resistant to these quantum attacks.
Okay. Than a lot of other cryptocurrencies.
Right, yeah. That's definitely, that's good news for IoTA.
Yep.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like we went from like 0 to 60 on IoTA and this whole tangle thing. And I'm not going to lie, I'm feeling pretty pumped about all the possibilities.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But before we wrap up, is there like one final thought-provoking nugget that you can leave us with? Something to really make our listeners kind of ponder the future of all this?
Absolutely. The paper does a great job of, like, outlining how the tangle works.
Right.
And the ways that it, defends against those attacks, the different strategies. But there's this one sort of fascinating assumption that underpins all of it
Okay.
that I think is worth kind of pondering.
And that's that everyone participating in the IOTA network, that they're all rational actors.
Okay, so they're assuming everyone is playing by the rules,
Yeah.
at least to some extent.
Yeah.
But what happens if that assumption no longer holds true?
Exactly. What if IOTA blows up? It's hugely successful.
Right.
It's adopted everywhere. And suddenly the incentives for attacking it, they change drastically.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a scenario where the potential rewards are massive. They're so tempting
Yeah.
that even a tiny chance of success, it's worth the risk, right? For an attacker with, almost unlimited resources.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
You're talking about a whole different level of threat, one where the usual rules, they don't even apply anymore.
Exactly. And that brings up this whole other set of questions, right? How do you design a system not just secure, but adaptable, resilient, against not just what we can imagine, but the threats we haven't even thought of yet?
Right. How do you future-proof a system against like an uncertain future.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those are some seriously big questions.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that the real challenge here is like building these systems that aren't just secure, but adaptable, evolving, you know, in the face of the unknown.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we'll leave our listeners to ponder those questions. Thank you for joining us on this really fascinating deep dive into the world of IoTA and its groundbreaking tangle technology. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those digital bloodhounds on the trail.